Think about any airshow you've been to. There is a lot of audio to manage, from narrators to music, cockpit communications, and beyond. Have you ever wanted to replicate the magic of audio mixing for your virtual team? I know I have, and with Voicemeeter, along with a little bit of work, you can achieve professional-grade audio mixing for your team's broadcast. Hi, I'm Logic, the right wingman for the flight simulator Thunderbirds. Today, I'm going to show you how our team manages audio from various sources to produce our live streams. By the end of this video, you should understand what an audio mixer is for, be able to use and navigate the Voicemeeter interface, route audio in and out of Voicemeeter, and troubleshoot basic issues you might encounter along the way. We will also take a look at how you can extend its functionality by incorporating some more advanced features. First and foremost, what is an audio mixer? Let's go back to thinking about airshows. There is normally a public address system with audio from all kinds of sources playing. There are times when the show's production crew wants you to hear music, other times narration, cockpit communications, commentators, and more. All of those audio sources typically enter into some form of mixer, so the show organizers can decide whether sound is played over the speakers or not, and what that sound is. Bringing those different sound sources together and combining one or more of them into an output is audio mixing. And there are ways we can emulate this same capability virtually with software. And that brings us to Voicemeeter. Voicemeeter is a powerful audio mixing software that lets you separate audio from different sources and decide what is heard in your headphones, on your stream, and beyond. That could be your simulator sounds, your microphone, a music player, Discord sounds, any application you can imagine that plays sound. Of course, you don't necessarily want all of these sounds going to your stream, even if you hear them in your headphones. Your ground crew streamer will probably want to be able to hear cockpit communications for the various phases of a demonstration. But those comms are likely not part of the intended broadcast, at least not for all of it, and that is why mixing is important. So let's get started with Voicemeeter. There are multiple versions of Voicemeeter. There is the standard Voicemeeter, Voicemeeter Banana, and Voicemeeter Potato. This table outlines the major differences between them. You can use whichever version you like, but I will demonstrate the rest of this video with Voicemeeter Potato, since that is what our team primarily uses. I do recommend you use Potato or Banana. There are tons of installation videos out there already if you need help installing Voicemeeter, so I'm going to assume you have the application installed. When you first open the application, it might look a little overwhelming. While Voicemeeter is very powerful, you'll quickly learn how to use its features, so there's no need to worry about the complexity of the interface at all. When you open Voicemeeter, you'll be presented with this screen. I would really divide the interface into 5 major sections. This is the hardware input area. These are going to be for your hardware input devices, typically devices like microphones. This is the virtual input area. Sound that is routed to Voicemeeter will come into the software via one of these virtual inputs. This is the hardware output area. This is where you choose which hardware Voicemeeter will play through. This will be audio devices connected to your computer, like headphones or speakers. This is the recorder area. This is handy for recording specific audio without capturing all of your computer's sounds like many video programs do by default. And this is the everything else area. If you don't want to, you don't need to touch this area ever. This offers more control and extra features that you can research further if you need it. We don't use these features often on the team, if at all. Now that you are familiar with the interface a little, let's talk about inputs. There are hardware inputs and there are virtual inputs. Hardware inputs are typically going to be pieces of hardware that are listening for sound. Your microphone is an example of a hardware input. There are software options to add more hardware inputs virtually that we will talk about later. For now, think microphone for hardware inputs. Next, we have virtual inputs. These three inputs are what we are going to send application sound to. These three inputs all act the same. There is no difference between the VAIO input, the aux input, and the VAIO 3 input. But these three inputs are what allow us to split audio up by application. And again, inputs, whether hardware or virtually based, are devices used to capture audio. They are listening for sound. Of course, we need to send that audio somewhere, and that somewhere is called an output. Just like inputs, there are hardware and virtual outputs in Voicemeeter. Hardware outputs are going to be devices you use to listen to sound, like headphones or speakers. With Voicemeeter Potato, you can select up to 5 different hardware outputs if you so choose. I recommend setting the primary device you listen with as your A1 output, and go from there. And finally, we have virtual outputs. These virtual outputs are actually going to be used for broadcasting. It's kind of confusing, but virtual outputs in Voicemeeter are going to be the input devices for other software like OBS. Sound is being routed through Voicemeeter to these virtual outputs, which are essentially listening like microphones. Therefore, in other applications you want to bring sound into, you'll select these virtual outputs as inputs. I'm going to set up Voicemeeter as if it was a clean slate so you can see exactly how I set it up. To begin, make sure you set A1 as your primary listening device, like your headphones. Otherwise, if you're listening along with me and following along by routing audio into the application, you're no longer going to hear anything. I'm going to set A1 as my headphones. You'll also want to check that A1 is green across the board. This means that sound from these inputs will play to your headphones. So, how exactly do we get audio into Voicemeeter? You can choose to selectively route application sound to Voicemeeter, or you can do it globally. I like to have all of my sound go to Voicemeeter. To do that, we're going to go to our Windows sound settings. Start by setting your default output device to Voicemeeter input. In Voicemeeter, the virtual input names are close, but they do not match. In case you are struggling to match them up, this table should help guide you. With your sound set to Voicemeeter input, you should notice that sound is now coming into the VAIO input. We are now able to add our hardware inputs and begin to decide how we want to split audio. There are many ways to go about this, so think about what is best for your team. As for the flight simulator Thunderbirds, we want sound from the simulator, Discord, TeamSpeak, our music application, and our voiceover application to all be separately controlled in Voicemeeter. This means that each of these will need to be on their own input. To achieve this, we need to set application output to the corresponding input in Voicemeeter. For example, in Discord, I've set my output device to Voicemeeter aux input. Once you are done with setting your applications up, it's best to label these inputs in Voicemeeter. I'll do that now. I use a virtual input for our music, so I'll label that as music player. For some of our voiceover capability, I use another virtual input, and we call that Rob. And for general purposes, I'll add my microphone. For virtual inputs, VAIO is my main game input. The aux input is for Discord, and the VAIO 3 input is for TeamSpeak. I want to hear all of these inputs in my headphones except for my microphone, so I have selected A1 to be on or off accordingly. Now that we have sound coming into Voicemeeter, let's dive into how we can route the sound we want out of Voicemeeter. Technically, we have already begun working on this by enabling our first hardware output for a number of our inputs. That's A1. If you have other headphones and speakers you want to hear sound through, You can add them to A2, A3, etc., and enable the corresponding output just like we did for A1. Notice we have 3 B outputs. I like to think of that B as meaning broadcast. I use these outputs to control the sound that appears in live streams. When you're live streaming, you might be comfortable with having all of your necessary inputs use B1 for simplicity. Our team splits sound between B1, B2, and B3 for our broadcasts. In a future video, I'll explain why. Just know that B1, 2, and 3 are going to correspond to Voicemeeter outputs. These outputs will be treated as inputs in other applications. For example, in OBS, you can see that these outputs are found under Mic Auxiliary Audio. Similar to inputs, this table shows the relationship of B numbers to the output name. And that's it. So far, we've gone through the Voicemeeter interface, sent all of our application sound to Voicemeeter, and now we've set up Voicemeeter to send our sound out to our broadcasting software. Now, there are a few issues you may run into while using Voicemeeter. There are times when opening or closing certain applications will cause sound to stop functioning through Voicemeeter. To resolve this, go to Menu, then select Restart Audio Engine. It may take a moment, but sound should begin to work again. Make sure you enable Show App on Startup, otherwise, until you run Voicemeeter, you're not going to hear any sound. If your hardware inputs or outputs are being used by applications outside of Voicemeeter, it is possible that using the wrong driver will cause sound to not play via Voicemeeter. To get around this, you can use MME instead of WDM. The sample buffer sizes also vary between WDM, KS, and MME, so choose what's best for your devices. I use MME normally. You may have slightly lower latency with other drivers, but for me it is not noticeable. In some cases, applications may not provide a direct way to change the sound output. You can directly control this via Windows by going to Sound Settings, and under Advanced Sound Options, click on App Volume and Device Preferences. Find the application you want to change the output for, and instead of default, select the desired Voicemeeter input instead. And finally, it is important to pay special attention to what inputs and outputs your applications are using. In OBS, for example, if you are monitoring audio and you aren't careful, you can quickly create a sound loop. And similarly, if you are streaming to someone else, even through Discord, it is important to only broadcast sound that doesn't include the input from the application you are using. Otherwise, viewers may be able to hear themselves if they are speaking to you. I wanted to touch base on just a few features or enhancements you can use to get the most out of Voicemeeter. Earlier, I mentioned it was possible to add more hardware inputs virtually. And what I meant by that is you can install software that provides additional devices for you to use as an input and an output. The company that makes Voicemeeter provides this as well. They are called virtual audio cables. For example, we have a voiceover application that provides some timing related information to members of our team. This will never appear in broadcasts, and only certain people need to hear it. We use an additional virtual audio cable to send application sound to, which sends the sound out through a hardware input in Voicemeeter. That way, the same person who is controlling Voicemeeter can decide if they want to hear this sound also, or in some cases when we are testing, we can send that sound to the stream as well. You can have many virtual audio cables to extend the number of inputs and outputs available to use. A link to try this out is in the video description. Secondly, I wanted to touch on the built-in recording function that Voicemeeter has. One of the benefits of separating your audio inputs is that you can use Voicemeeter to record audio from specific applications. For example, you may be streaming all of the sounds, the simulator, narration, and music, but you also want to simultaneously record cockpit communications with no other sound. You can choose the input or the output you want to record and then record a separate file of just that sound directly from Voicemeeter. So today, we learned how audio mixers can help you separate audio to improve the fidelity of virtual airshow performances. We explored Voicemeeter, its interface, how to get audio into Voicemeeter, mix it, and then send that audio out. We talked about some issues you might run into and how to resolve them. And finally, we spent a little time on some features I hope you'll find handy. If you want to learn more about our team's workflow, I invite you to consider subscribing to our channel. We'll provide more behind-the-scenes looks at some of the software we use and how you can set yourself up for success. And if you have specific questions, please leave a comment or join our Discord, which is also linked in the description. I hope this video was helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you at a virtual airshow soon. Thank you.